Any questions? And if you're not, well, I'll catch you on the next super review. Have a good week. Let's get to it. Got my trusty tea here. I've gone with a what tea am I drinking? Thyme. This is a thyme tea. A nice subtle tea. Maybe not the maybe if I was trying to match my tea to this review with the Blessing 3, maybe a chrysanthemum or something like that would be. It's not like a bold flavor, it's just kind of a nice, clean, easy flavor that works well a lot of the time. All right, let me catch up with live chat. How we doing, folks? Bow. Oh, cracking up. Thank you for joining me early and for coming via the Alert Squad, which, if you're not aware, well, of course, it's YouTube. You can ding the YouTube bell and hope that YouTube will alert you when I go live, but they're not super consistent. So if you join the Discord server, which is also linked below, you can opt into the Alert Squad role, and I ping the Alert Squad whenever I go live. That never fails, at least I don't think it fails. Much more consistent than YouTube's notifications, so check it out. Ace of Spades also from the notification gang, although I don't know if you're using Alert Squad or not, so maybe YouTube's working out for you. But yeah, thanks for joining me early. Shimon, how you doing? Good seeing you there. And Koresh, how you doing, sir? Patrick, give me a little that. How we doing? Good afternoon. Actually, good morning. It's still morning here in California. It's 11 a.m. Habelmet saying, if anything, the only thing I hate on these is how they look. Moondrop IMs never looked nice to me. The Blessing 3 is just egregious to my eyes. I really like Dunu's styling, and this ain't it. I mean, if I'm being honest, I do think that Dunu makes better looking IMs than Blessing, or than Moondrop tends to. But I don't hate on this look at all. This is a very handsome IM to me. Just versus, you know, most IMs out there. This would probably be my top 10% in terms of aesthetics on IMs. Maybe I'll do that. I'll have to do like a tier chart or a tier ranking of just purely aesthetics for IMs. E-boy saying 5-star prediction with butts. There was just one butt. Just one butt this time. Bass range, how you doing? Saying if only it had more bass. And you know, in a sense, that's what I'm saying. I wish it had more mid bass specifically, but I don't need like a lot of it. Again, I think the bass on the Blessing 2 is chef's kiss, exactly where I want bass levels to be on an IM. The Blessing 3 is just less than that, unfortunately. BTFR saying 5 stars, new favorite IM. Picking a favorite, an absolute favorite between these two is actually going to be difficult in the same way that picking an IM that I liked better than the Blessing 2 is pretty difficult. Because no matter, I would find IMs that solved a lot of the technical problems that I had with the Blessing 2, but I kept coming back to it because nothing that I found solved those technical problems and delivered the tonal balance of this. And I think that's unfortunately still true here with the Blessing 3. Again, that doesn't mean that this isn't better than the Blessing 2 in a lot of ways. And it doesn't mean that I don't love it, because again, there's a lot of IMs out there that I love a lot. Let's say, for example, the Moondrop S8, the Unique Melody MEST Mark II, the 64 Audio U4S. These are all fantastic IMs, but I don't view them as necessarily upgrades over the Blessing 2 because they don't do everything that the Blessing 2 does for me. And that's kind of true here with the Blessing 3, unfortunately. It kind of fits into, you know, being in the same sentence as Unique Melody MEST Mark II and 64 Audio U4S and U12T And all this stuff is good company to be in the business of. But is it the replacement to the Blessing 2? I think we still got to wait for that. And again, I don't know how likely we are to get a Moondrop Blessing 3 that does the bass curve that I like, because it doesn't seem to be what's trendy now, I guess is maybe another way of saying that. So it might not ever happen, but I still love it. Just like I love those other IMs. Kieran Patel making the bold claim of calling it a 3-star review because of the 3 in the name. You've got a fixation with the numbers and names thing. That's not the first time you've done that. How well is that working out for you? It'd be interesting to go back and see. And Habblemet saying, I'm guessing a 4 because the treble looks like a little to me. I'm a very much shout and treble resistant, but that's getting there. The treble I think is actually pretty outstanding here on the Blessing 3. It solves those high frequency extension problems of the Blessing 2, and also seems to solve some of the sharpness that, again, I didn't think the Blessing 2 was usually sharp, but it could occasionally be a little bit sharp. Again, it kind of gets into when an IM is this good, all my complaints start becoming nitpicks, and those are nitpicks that I had about the Blessing 2 that I think are absolutely improved here on the Blessing 3. Debrup Banik saying 5-star sound, but looks wise, it is not great. Interesting. I'm surprised so many people. Here. This will be that question to folks here. Which of this bunch would you say is your aesthetic preference? Because I'm surprised that there are as many people saying that they don't like the looks here of the Blessing 2 or the Blessing 3. I think this is a really good looking IM. I wish it wasn't glossy because of the fingerprints, but I don't know. I could say that is true of a bunch of IMs if I'm honest. I think it's a really handsome IM. In fact, I would say all these are pretty handsome. If I were to rank these in terms of aesthetics, my preference would probably be number 1, number 2. These are the same, number 3, and then number 4. This one's just a little bit. I dig the all black aesthetic on this thing. But yeah, I think this is my favorite looking on the bunch. But what's your vote, folks? I see some speculation about if I was going to give this a 4 or 5-star. Koresh, I gave the Dusk 5 stars because it's an excellent IM. Didn't mean I didn't still prefer the Blessing 2, but again, I prefer the Blessing 2 to a lot of other IMs that I still give 5 stars. It's just it happens to hit my tonal balance preferences exactly, whereas other IMs have different advantages. David K saying the 2DD aspect is what I'm most curious on, and I'm also curious, but more from like a question perspective. Like, as a person on this side of the engineering of an IM, right? I don't engineer IMs. I just get to listen to them and experience them as they are delivered to me. I don't know what is the difference between having 2 dynamic drivers versus multiples. I know in, let's say, for example, the case of the Truth Ear 0. They use dual dynamic drivers in a crossover specifically so that they can get that very distinct bass curve that they have on that IM. The Dusk actually does the Dusk gets a very similar bass curve, which is a single dynamic driver. And so you would think that it should be possible here in the Blessing 3 to get that bass curve with a single dynamic driver. But maybe there's something about the bass presentation. Like if I were hear the Blessing 3 with 1 versus 2 dynamic drivers, maybe I would hear some distinct difference. But unfortunately, I will say at this side of that equation, I don't have 2 versions of the Blessing 3 to hear with the same exact frequency response, but different dynamic driver configuration. So I can only assume that it helped the engineers achieve exactly the bass presentation here, but to what extent and exactly how, I don't know. And I don't want to speculate too much on it, to be honest, because I don't want to even spread memes that having 2 dynamic drivers is necessarily better than having 1. I don't know. There have been some really good bass IMs that have only 1 dynamic driver. In fact, let's see what comes to mind would be the Let's Shore EJ07M, Kinda Lava. Fantastic bass. Probably my favorite bass in an IM, and it's just a single dynamic driver. And Huron saying the bass is weak. I heard it. It's definitely relaxed on the bass. Like if you're looking for a bassy set, the Blessing 3 is not it. The Blessing 2 is not it. The Blessing 2 Dusk starts to become bassy. It's got a bit of that blam factor. I would still describe the bass on the Blessing 3 as pitter patter bass, which has got a nice physicality to what there is. But if you're looking for that, like something that moves you, I don't think that this is going to be it. Vesquax had to get out of bed for this one. Are you getting out of bed early or are you getting out of bed late? Because I know some people, like in Southeast Asia, it is late at night now. Septian Patterson, I clicked this video so fast. Well, welcome. Thank you for clicking. I appreciate it. You got any questions about the Blessing 3? Now is your chance. I was a prisoner in your skull saying a 3. I say you're guessing a 3-star. A bold move, considering how much I love the Blessing 2. It's interesting. Why would you expect I would give it a 3, or you're saying you would give it a 3? And if you've heard it, I'm kind of curious to hear from more people who've heard it. What did you think? Zest Defender saying, yeah, I want to know if the 2DD thing is a pure gimmick. Again, I can't say that it's pure gimmick or that it's the bee's knees. I don't know. I can only hear it. I told you exactly what I heard. It's not a lot of bass. If your assumption is that 2 dynamic drivers equals more bass, well, there is definitely not more bass here, but I think that is very much an intentional thing. That is a choice rather than they put 2 dynamic drivers in it and they just couldn't figure out how to get more bass. They can get more bass if they want. I just have to assume that there's something about the bass quality here, and it is good bass, that they were able to achieve with the double dynamic driver setup. But I don't have the A and the B to compare here, so I can't say. Raw Pock, how you doing? Saying we are truly blessed. I think so. I think so. Having these 3 beautiful IMs here to choose from, I feel blessed. VX Ace making the bold claim, this is still not better than the Ola. I'm going to contest that. I think the Blessing 3 is better than the Ola. Maybe, are we talking about the cable specifically? Is this cable better than the Ola cable? I would say it's behavior-wise, actually probably not. Aesthetically, I prefer this one. And so I would, in choosing between the Ola cable, which is a top tier cable, and this cable, would more come down to the aesthetic match on the IM. Here on the Blessing 3, I like this cable better than the Ola cable. If I was putting a cable on the soft ears, I would rather put the Ola cable because I would want to keep the all black aesthetic. Septian saying, I'm happy Moondrop kept the price below $500. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised that they didn't increase the price at all. If not only for the fact that inflation has happened over the last 3 years, right? We kind of went through a pandemic and lots of pumping of cash into the economy, and then the subsequent, nosediving of production output has resulted in inflation, and still the price of this IM is $320, which is pretty impressive. The other reason that they could have increased the price is that the Blessing 3 or the Blessing 2 has been the best IM under $500 for the past 3 years. So if they wanted to increase the price on the Blessing 3, make it $400, they'd still be like out competing most IMs at under $500. So yeah, I think it's a blessing that they didn't raise the price. Descartes saying greetings from Austria. Greetings, how you doing? Greetings from California. Leonardo asking, what is my opinion of the 3D printed body? I dig it. I like being able to see through it. It is not as crystalline clear as the body here on the orchestra. I'm trying to find a good angle to maybe illustrate that. You can kind of see here like how easy it is to see the balanced armatures inside this, whereas here on the Blessing 3, I don't know, yeah, I feel like this detail is not going to come through in the live stream, but it's a little bit cloudier. And it's ever so slightly different, but it does contribute, especially when you start looking through the thicker parts of the IM and just like how much more light will pass through this one versus the dusk. Now that said, I dig it. I dig it a lot, and I like that it's a solid acrylic versus some hollow shells that you get on some other IMs. Again, it's purely just for aesthetics that I like it. Steve saying mine's on order. Anupam, how you doing, man? Good seeing you there. Enjoying your supernova. Yeah, I guess I didn't get into this because, well, the supernova I think is priced outside of the range of comparison here on this table. But I mentioned this has been my favorite IM for the past 3 years until a few months ago when I reviewed the 7th Acoustics Supernova. The Supernova basically does the tonal balance that I like of this, plus a significant improvement in technical performance. In fact, I would say Supernova technical performance is even better than the Blessing 3. And so I've got this tonal balance plus even better technical performance than what's on this table. The Supernova is currently my favorite IM of all time. When I'm not listening to stuff for reviews, the Supernova is generally what's in my ears lately. And Anupam, you picked one up recently. It sounds like you're enjoying it as well. I don't know if you like it as much as I did, but you're definitely... I haven't heard anyone not like it, I suppose. Spirit Fair, the White Samurai, saying, hey, how's it going? Universal, that soft case, oh my. Are you into this soft case? Again, it's a little bit chonky, a little bit rattly for my taste, but certainly well built. It's a nice product. DNT Arc saying that the font kind of reminds me of Nothing. That's actually a good call out. I don't have the Nothing here nearby to bring up, but yeah, the Nothing earphones or just that whole branding kind of goes for like this almost like dot matrix print, and that is very similar to what we get here. You know, it's not showing up here. Let me pull up the box. This is the better representation of this sort of dot matrix futuristic print. That's actually a good call out. I didn't think about that. Jackal saying buy Chew for the spring tips and then sell the IMs. Yeah, if you need to, I guess I didn't mention why. I prefer spring tips here on the Blessing 3 and the Blessing 2. Let me give you a little bit of a demonstration why, okay? And why I really do think that Moondrop should consider including spring tips in here. In fact, I'm surprised they didn't. Two reasons, right? I mentioned that the stock tips, the bore can, in my experience with the Blessing 2, get stretched out over time and then stop gripping the nozzle very well. Once I switched to spring tips, I never had that problem. Okay, partly is maybe because it's a little bit less memory prone of a material, but I think it's also just kind of a grippier silicone, so it hangs on to the nozzle. I found better. But for me, the real reason I like the spring tips is just the way that they fit. They're just short ear tips, right? So you can kind of see relative to where the nozzle is that there's not much distance between the nozzle and the end of the ear tip. Whereas I put even these small ear tips on here, there's more of a distance there. And it might not look like much, but we're talking about 1 to 2 millimeters. And when it comes to fitting into the inside of my ear, it's actually significant. And it just, for me, wearing a small or medium spring tip, maybe even a little bit better with small spring tips, but wearing the medium ear tip just allows us to fit a little bit deeper into my ear more comfortably. And all I need is just kind of like this gasket around my ear canal. I get that with the spring tips. And again, that's why it would be nice if they included it here. You can get spring tips pretty inexpensively. It's like $12 for a pack of 3, but if you don't know what size you want, maybe just buy a Moondrop Chew for $20 and you'll get all the sizes. Debrup saying, I think every cable should be same as the Ola. Yeah, man, the Ola cable is... I'm glad to see even more support for the Ola cable. The Ola cable is top tier. It would be nice if there was like a clear or white variant like this to go with my clear IMs, because then I maybe would just completely get rid of the SSR cable, but the SSR cable is still my favorite for IMs like this because the behavior on it, you can see that how it just like, it lies out flat, no memory, less stiff, it drapes a little bit better, a little bit nicer than this cable. So I still prefer the SSR cable to the new Blessing 3 cable, although the downsides are that you got a fairly chunky Y split. And if you want a chin cinch, you're gonna have to install your own like I have with this O-ring here. So it's got some downsides. It's still a lovely, lovely cable. On Kuro saying, I think the added 1DD made it so that Moondrop had to cut costs on the accessories to keep the 320 price tag. I can't remember, were there other accessories that were included in the Blessing 2 that are not included here? I don't really remember what came with the Blessing 2. I just remember it came with a very similar case. Leonardo asking, is my Blessing 2 yellowing over time? I mean, you can see them here on screen side by side. This is a 3-year-old Moondrop Blessing 3 or Blessing 2 versus a brand new Moondrop Blessing 3. No yellowing now. Kelvin, glad you're able to stay awake out there in Singapore. Hopefully it was worth it. Jackal. Faceplates should be customizable. Not everyone likes that chrome fingerprint magnet faceplate. Yeah, I don't know, maybe when they release updated versions of the Blessing 3, maybe if they make the Husk version and they make it with a matte finish on the outer panel, then we can have zero complaints. But for the time being, we have a couple of, at least I have, a couple of fairly minor complaints. Ooh, Descartes suggesting colored anodized plates would be sick. Yeah, they could do more interesting things, especially because of the neutral translucent plastic here, or the acrylic shell. They could do a little bit more interesting designs on this panel, apart from just being silver. And again, if Moondrop, you guys want to like start doing customizations on this IM and maybe even increase the price for those customizations, I think people will be willing to pay for it, because at this price point, at under 500 bucks, maybe even at less than the Supernova, basically below the Supernova, I don't think there's anything that competes with the Blessing 3. I don't know, I can't think of anything. There's like the Dunu SA6, which is like, I think I like this better than the SA6. There's the SA6 Mark II, which I haven't heard yet, and review for that should be coming. But yeah, I don't know. They're basically, what I'm saying, Moondrop, is that there is wiggle room to charge more and give people what they want, if you want to do it. On Kuro saying, I have the Blessing 3 and oh my god, it's amazing. I added a 6 dB bass shelf to it and it sounded better. Overall 10 out of 10, love it. Wow, 6 dB bass shelf. Yeah, at what frequency? I'm kind of curious where you decided to put it. Kelvin saying, didn't Moondrop confirm Blessing 3 Dusk is in the works? And yes, I think so. I think I saw some screenshots of chats on Discord with a representative, well, basically the guy that runs Moondrop, or the Shenzhen Audio, saying that Blessing 3 Dusk seems to be already in development, and that it is being developed with Critical. So it does seem to be confirmed at this point. I haven't heard Critical talk about it. And Kelvin saying a grease magnet faceplates. Yeah, man. And this is like, again, I literally took a shower like an hour before this stream. So this is like peak performance for my fingers. And I'm not an especially greasy fingerprint guy, but yeah, when you're this glossy, it's just kind of inevitable. So I've got the microfiber towel, I suppose. There you go. There's your gloss. Enjoy it while you can. Jackal saying they should make a Blessing 3 light and make the shell smaller. I wonder if they could. I don't know. I mean, I assume the shape of this is, you know, largely dictated by the internals. Not just like how many drivers are in there, but also, you know, the necessary shape and angle of the tubing inside. But I don't know, you know, you can see that there is room here to cut back a little bit there. They could shave off down here a little bit. I don't know that it would necessarily improve the fit, because, you know, these things get complicated and you need 3D models and probably just a lot of trial and error to arrive at a shape that works well for most ears. Yeah, I don't know that it's just a matter of them deciding to do it. Like, I assume there are more complications there. Leonardo asking, would I buy a filter for them? So no, that's actually an interesting point. I didn't talk too much about the nozzle apart from the width, but you know, it's open to, there's no filter over the top of this. There's no screen like there was on, well, there actually wasn't on the Blessing 2. The Blessing 2 also shipped without a screen, you can see here. But then later on, with later releases of the Blessing 2, they started shipping it with a stick-on screen over the top of it. In fact, my Dusk came with that screen. But you might notice that my Dusk does not have it now because I don't think it's necessary. Most IMs, in fact, here you go. Here's another IM that has open bores. Here's another IM that has open bores. Most IMs with this design do not have screens over the top. So it was actually kind of an exception that the Blessing 2 started to ship with those screens. So I personally don't find the need for them. I can understand why people are a little bit concerned about things potentially drifting into the nozzles of their IMs, and that would, you know, have very significant impacts on the sound quality. But I don't know. It has not been a problem for me for the 3 years that I've had the Blessing 2. An IM that I use quite heavily, so I'm not worried about it on all of my other IMs. I'm not worried about it on the Blessing 3. Descartes saying a Blessing 3 DSP lightning termination. Ugh, I want it to have a 3.5 mil. That's all I want. I don't want USB or lightning. My Life Matters saying an IE600 and U4S killer. Well, I wouldn't say that actually. I mean, would I take this over the IE600 or the U4S, given I had no other IMs to choose from? Personally, I probably actually would, just because this hits my tonal preferences better. But this is very different than something like the IE600 or the U4S. If you've already got something that hits one niche, then looking for the new IM, if you're looking for just like the upgrade of it, I think you might be doing a little bit of a disservice to yourself. Maybe that's just my personal preferences. I like IMs to do things differently, and that's where like the U4S and the IE600 do things differently. They do things differently than the Blessings. And I think even compared to each other, the U4S and the IE600 do things differently. And that's, I mean, it's what I like about them. So, yeah, I don't know that I would say that this thing kills those IMs. And I wouldn't say that those IMs kill this IM. They're different things. It's like, does a Mazda Miata kill a BMW M3? No, they're different cars. There's going to be some things that, I mean, I personally like a Mazda Miata better, but it's because I don't need a back seat. I don't need to put people back there. I don't need to go, 150 miles an hour down a straight. I don't need to do that. So I like the Miata. But if I had the choice, I'd love to have a BMW M3 to drive every once in a while. Maybe the M2. The newer M2 is more like what I would like versus the newer M3s. I like the older M3s. Kelvin saying's got them double Ds, that's right. Double dynamics. Does Dallas. Steve saying, I guess the double DDs is for those who want to up the bass with EQ. I mean, maybe. I don't know. You can... I feel like people kind of have misconceptions about the way that the EQ works. The way the EQ works is you're affecting the signal, right? You're not really changing how the IM is driven. You're affecting the signal. So by increasing the bass, you are effectively just lowering everything else. And you don't need like a double dynamic driver to be able to handle that. Maybe you need the double dynamic, maybe where it does come into play is like you're doing like really drastic changes. And now because you've lowered the rest of the audio in order to get the bass levels to where you want, now you have to play it at a louder sound or at louder volume levels. And perhaps you're listening at volume levels loud enough where things start to distort, and maybe now you need double dynamic drivers to help reduce distortion. Whether or not it does that, again, I don't know. But I guess I don't listen at volume levels anywhere near where that kind of stuff is a concern for me. So I don't think about it too much. Herein, what do we got next? You're saying it's too lean. It needs to drink 1 gallon of milk a day. Then, yeah, maybe something a little bit more than milk. Maybe a little bit of creatine. You know, a little pre-workout. I don't know anything about working out. Sorry. Could you tell? You could probably tell. Bayou asking, do you think these would be good for games to hear footsteps? Yeah, I mean, anything that I describe as having good imaging is probably going to be good for gaming. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm not super into competitive, first-person shooter gaming with IMs. I don't do that myself. Maybe this is why I'm like kind of dismissive of this idea in general, but I feel like gaming is not that unique of a use case, right? In the same way, like people ask me, is this good for jazz? I described that it's good at a lot of things. Whether or not those are things that you care about, yes, then it's good at that, right? I described the Blessing 3 as being good at imaging, 3D positions. If that applies to what you want out of it for gaming, then yes, it's good for that. But it's not like that gaming is some special use case, like the gaming audio is somehow distinctly different from a jazz album that might also have 3D positioning in its mix. Gaming to me is basically just another genre. And again, maybe that's just because I don't do a lot of first-person shooter gaming with IMs that I have that opinion. But I feel like there's a bit of a meme with what people imagine an IM or a headphone to do for their gaming abilities. Just look for stuff that has good imaging. It's going to be good for game. Good if that's what you're looking for. You're looking for 3D position of sounds. How it does it for music is going to be the same for how it does it for gaming. Kelvin saying, whoops, bass tuck. Yeah, I mean, look, all of these, apart from the Blessing 3, all of these IMs kind of have a bit of a bass tuck, even this one. But where it's done here on the Kiwi Ears Orchestra Lite is much higher in the bass frequency. So I think this does the better job of preserving the mid-bass punch and that body and the heft behind the music. Whereas these three come across on the lean side, lean and more clinical. Whereas this has got a little bit more of that body and a little bit more richness. Actually, I would say a significant bit more richness to the sound versus these three. This one is my favorite balance of those, but if you're looking for a big sub-bass emphasis without sacrificing that richness, I do think that the Orchestra Lite does a good job of that. BTFR is asking, is the leanness similar to Variations? Yeah, that's actually an IM I wish I had on hand to compare, and I don't have it on hand. So I want to listen to this thing directly head-to-head with the Variations. Because from memory, I want to say that the Variations is even leaner. I feel like I had even a bigger issue with the inconsistency from song to song with the Variations because of how drastic the difference is between the sub-bass and the mid-bass on that IM. But I don't have that IM on hand to compare, so I can't say that confidently. But I do want to say, from memory, I like the Blessing 3 better than the Variations, but I also like the Blessing 2 better than the Variations personally. Mark is saying the fit doesn't come loose because they stretch. It's because oils from your skin, etc., get around the silicone, etc. Just wipe inside with an alcohol. So I clean my stuff with alcohol wipes. It was definitely stretching, I promise you, that caused the issues with the ear tips falling off my Blessing 2. I have no doubt that what you're describing also can happen. Absolutely, oils can get in there and reduce the grip that a tip has on the nozzle. But I think the tips that come with the Blessing 2 and the Blessing 3 tend to stretch out. I think that's absolutely true. Rob Hawk saying, I liked adding X bass to the Blessing 3. Yeah, I'm sure that's pretty enjoyable. A little X bass never hurt anybody. Emmanuel asking in the end, better the Blessing 2 Dusk or the B3 for sound? I prefer the Blessing 3. I think the Blessing 3 is almost strictly better for me than the Blessing 2 Dusk. In that this has kind of the same mid-range leanness problem that the Blessing 3 has, so I don't think it's an improvement there. And the treble is not as good as the treble is here on this IM. In fact, I would say, yeah, this one is just the better IM for me overall versus the Dusk. Now that said, if you like the Dusk because you like that extra sub-bass content, this doesn't quite do that, okay? There is more sub-bass blam on the Blessing 2 Dusk. It's gonna like surprise you more with the bass content versus the Blessing 3 is probably not gonna surprise you with the bass content. So for some people, the Dusk would still kind of be the go-to because it's still the bassier set. But if I'm choosing for me, both excellent IMs, I'll pick the Blessing 3. Cod King say, I'm using the Blonde BL03 and the 7Hz Sound Notes 0 with Bluetooth amp, a Stellan Kern XB10. Interesting. Zest Defender and Calvin backing me up on the demand for a Husk edition. Let's do it. Come on, Moondrop, we can do it. Herein asking why would the B3 Dusk not have more upper bass? So my assumption is that if they, all right, Blessing 2 to Blessing 2 Dusk, the differences are significantly in the bass region, where the Blessing 2 Dusk has kind of that lower mid-range scoop with a very big emphasis in the sub bass, whereas this has got more linear transition from the mid-range to the bass and less sub bass. So that's kind of the big difference here, right? You get more bass, but it's more sub bass and less mid bass. This is already kind of doing that more sub bass, less mid bass. Not as much sub bass as this, but it's doing that less mid bass. My suspicion is that if Critical's working with them to tune this to be more to his liking, and he likes that significant bass increase that you get here, you're going to get more sub bass content, but probably not significantly more mid bass content, because that's kind of the opposite of what they did from this transition. So my suspicion is that from this to a Blessing 3 Dusk edition will not be going backward versus the way that this transition did, if that makes sense. Is that IM math? Does that add up? Maybe not. I'm not predicting, well, I guess I'm making a little bit of a prediction, but I could be wrong. I could be happily wrong, I suppose. Cod King, okay, so your follow-up about the IMs you have in your DAP is asking, should you upgrade to a more expensive IM? I mean, are you happy? If you're happy with what you got, why? If you're looking for something different, sure, why not? I guess you need a little bit more there. I mean, I'm a big fan of having way more IMs than I need, just because I enjoy the variety, I enjoy switching around, I enjoy different sound signatures, I enjoy just achieving even higher levels of technical performance. Sure, if you don't care about that stuff, why would you? Herein asking for someone in New York to buy the Blessing 3 so that he can try it out. Yeah, that would be convenient. Maybe Audio 46 has it. Anupama asking, how does the Blessing 3 compare with the Supernova? And I don't have the Supernova here on the table because it's twice the price of this IM. I think it's significantly pricier to the point that if you're shopping for this IM, I'm not going to push you to the Supernova, although I like the Supernova better. And I think that the Supernova really does perform better than its price says it should, and kind of the same way that this does. It's like an overperformer. But how does this compare versus the Supernova? I think the Supernova gives me just a much fuller sound without, like, it doesn't have that lower mid-range upper bass scoop that the Blessing 3 does, right? So the Supernova never really comes across as lean to me, but it is also neither like a thick, bassy, muddy sound at all. It gives me just outstanding technical performance. I think the Supernova does an even better job with the incisiveness and the treble versus the Blessing 3, and the Blessing 3 does a very, very good job of it. But it is, in my opinion, next level. So that delineation between sounds, that separation between instruments, and also kind of like the width of the stereo image, for me on the Supernova is next level versus these IMs. Maybe the only thing that's kind of competitive would be something like the Soft Ears Studio 4 over here, but then versus the Studio 4, I think the Supernova just does timbre so much better. And the tonal balance in the Supernova is basically perfect, exactly where I want it to be. Gives me all the treble extension that I want. Again, a little bit more incisive and less, maybe more weighty, I suppose, than like the treble extension that you get on this set. The Supernova is just, I don't really have any complaints about the Supernova. I don't know how things get better from here. But actually, Anupam, I'm kind of curious from your opinion, how would you improve the Supernova? Jonathan Lerner saying, I have teeny tiny ear canals, which prevented me from buying the B2. Use extra small in most earbuds. Do you think the smaller nozzle on the B3 fixed this issue? If specifically the issue is with the ear canal, like where this nozzle fits, there is absolutely an improvement here. I don't know, I'll put this on screen and show you as, oh my gosh, I think I'm gonna have to take these things off of the cable to give you the best visual possible. Can you see the difference between those nozzles? Because I think it is significant, right? 10% smaller might not sound significant, but there, when you see it back to back, it is very significant, narrower here. Now, that said, that is only one area of this IM design that might be the bottleneck for your particular ear. Because what I found was that, for me, it's not so much the nozzle difference, right? Or the nozzle. When I wear these things back to back, I can tell that this is a little bit easier fitting, but that is not where either of these IMs kind of collides with my ear. For me, it's much more around here and sort of like where the IM tapers into the nozzle that kind of conflicts with the entrance to my ear canal, I suppose. So again, if you know that the bottleneck for your ear is the ear canal itself, yes, this should be a significant improvement. If the bottleneck is instead the ear canal entrance, you can kind of see here side by side, they're not different. I mean, it's hard for me to measure these things precisely. I do have some calipers, and so that's how I was able to measure these, but like that two-dimensional measurement is pretty easy. Measuring sort of this complex 3D shape, they seem to be identical to me as far as I can tell. And in terms of how they fit in my ear, they fit basically identical to me. So whether or not it is a solution for your particular ear, I can't predict. Hopefully you know better, and that is enough information for you to make a decision. But you still might need to try it before you're certain. Sam G saying it would be nice to see them add a lip to the nozzle so the ear tips are prone to fall off. Again, I have not had any issues with the spring tips falling off. These things stick on quite well. What I will say, actually, I didn't mention this. So the Blessing 3 nozzle does not have a lip, as you can see. Also same here. But one change that they made is that the Blessing 3 nozzle is 0.1 millimeter narrower down here versus the top. So it is actually slightly tapered outward. And that will contribute to holding on an ear tip even better. Whereas the Blessing 2 has the exact opposite direction. You can see that it's, if you go down about 5 millimeters where the base of the ear tip will fit, it's actually a little bit wider than it is at the top. So it's tapered inward, so more likely to eject an ear tip, I suppose. So I think despite this not having a bespoke nozzle, or sorry, a bespoke notch, the shape of the nozzle is in fact designed to better hold on to an ear tip. But again, I don't have issues with spring tips on either of these, so I'm happy either way. Cod King, a little bit more detail now, thank you. Asking about the Truth Ear Zero, is it a good choice and how much performance should I expect going from $20 to a $50 IM? I wouldn't hang up too much on the price differences, okay? I don't try not to think about sound in terms of like this good, better, best, cheap, middle, expensive sort of scale, because it's not always that linear. Check out my review. I did a review of the Truth Ear Zero. Hopefully I describe it in a way that helps you decide whether or not you would like it. You said you had the blonde BL03 and I forget what the other IM was. The 7 Hertz Zero. Is the Truth Ear Zero better? I'm just gonna say it's different than both of those. Okay, it's different, and whether or not it's better is going to be really up to your personal preferences. My personal preferences between those three, purely on sound, I would probably pick the 7 Hertz Zero. Would be my preference. For build quality and aesthetics and stuff like that, I'd probably pick the Truth Ear Zero. So there you go. Is that worth the jump from 20 to 50 bucks? It's honestly, it's much more about how they're different in their sound rather than how much I personally like them differently. But yeah, go down that rabbit hole. And Scott Pleasure, thank you for the super chat. Appreciate it as always. How you doing? Got a drop, but hopefully I'll get to listen to these soon. Yeah, hopefully you will. Yeah, hopefully you're having a good weekend, and sorry you can't hang around, but I'm sure you've got exciting things going on your Sunday afternoon, like I'm hoping to have soon. So the reason I'm doing this review actually a little bit earlier than usual is the weather has been nice. Peeking out, it's a little bit gloomy today, but the weather has been really nice. I feel like we're finally at the end of winter. It's been a long winter here in San Francisco, and I want to go for a motorcycle ride today, so that's why I'm doing this stream a little bit earlier. I don't know if you're going for a motorcycle ride, but hopefully you've also got some good plans for the weekend. All right, back to where we were. At least I'm gonna try and get back there. Okay, please hold. Technical difficulties. All right. Can I scroll back? We made it. We're back, I think. D-Prep saying the look of the studio for it is awesome. I agree. It looks good. BTFR asking, does the mid-bass tuck mean you still prefer the OG Blessing 2 tonally, or are the upgrades in technical and treble performance enough to make you prefer the Blessing 3? I think that's a very good question. And that's the kind of question that honestly is hard for me to answer. Except over time. And like the way that here's what I'll say, I still prefer the tonality of the Blessing 2. I think this is the better tuned IM for my preferences, okay? Versus the Blessing 3. But the treble is so much better here on the Blessing 3 that it might be more important for me. And why I say might is that, again, I think these are the sorts of things that what I need to do is just live a couple of months with these IMs in my possession and find out which is the IM that I'm more likely to reach for when I don't need to do it, right? And that's part of like why I leave like what I talk about when I'm doing like the earphone of the year awards, right? Is I want an IM that I've had time to not just do a review for, but also just have in my cabinet. And like, do I reach for it Do I go back to it? And I'll say, like, surprisingly, this has been one, these two, right? Here's a comparison, right? I think when I did the review, I would have told you I like the Studio 4 better, but I happen to reach for the Kiwi Ears Orchestra Lite more often than I do for this one. And why is it exactly? I don't know. I think it's just a little bit more different tonally than the other stuff I listen to. And I think I like the heft of there's something about that, and the way it fits me is a little bit better. It's like those sorts of things contribute to, again, kind of like the long-term impressions that are hard for me to predict at this point. So if you were to ask me right now, I can only have the Blessing 2 or I can only have the Blessing 3 and no other IEM, I'd probably pick the Blessing 3. In 6 months from now, would I say the same thing? I don't know. We'll find out. And I see Audiotron also asking about the Blessing 3 versus the Supernova. Hopefully answer that question. I really do think that the Supernova is like next level. It is awesome. And it's actually kind of surprising in a sense, like how much better the Supernova sounds to me, even like in technical performance, given, this solved kind of all of my technical complaints with the Blessing 2. This solved them, and yet still there is room for the Supernova to sound even just better to me. More incisive, more defined, stronger weight behind everything, a bigger head stage. It's just, Supernova is so good. Me gusta el Supernova. Oh, and yeah, S2 saying, Sam G, if the nozzle tapers narrow, like I was kind of outlining here, it is effectively similar to a lip. And yeah, I think that is the experience that I had. Again, I have not had the time to stretch out a stock ear tip to find out if it will have the same issues as the Blessing 2 did. But it seems that they've made changes that I would expect will reduce that likelihood. And Kelvin, I appreciate you reminding people to drop a like. Like the video is very helpful for me. And also, I should ask for this more often. Share the video. Post it to Reddit, Headfly. Share it with a friend that you think is shopping for IEMs. Whatever it is. That kind of stuff really helps the channel more than you can imagine. Now I'm coughing. VXA saying, if something is lean for Mark, I'm out. I take it to mean that my preferences tend to be leaner than your preferences from the start, which is fair enough. I'm not a big like mid-bass synthesis guy. Just not a big bass guy, I guess. Vigas saying, I wonder if they'll keep producing the Blessing 2 but just make it cheaper. My expectation would be no. I believe that they've formally sunset like the Moondrop SSR, and I'm sure there's still plenty of them around. There will probably still be Blessing 2s around that you can buy brand new for a while. It'll take a while for the stock to deplete. And when they do sales, like, let's say you're looking forward to, typical annual sales, maybe they'll even discount the Blessing 2, the existing stock they have, more aggressively than they'll discount the Blessing 3. That would be kind of my predictions. But I don't expect that they'll continue producing the Blessing 2 and somehow lower the price point to sell it at a cheaper price. My expectations is that the Blessing 2 is over. This is now the Blessing 3 era. Gerardo Lopez asking, which cable am I using on the Blessing 2 Dusk? Yeah, so this is, it doesn't have a name. I can link you to it later. But this is a cable that I found on AliExpress. It's kind of similar to the SSR cable, right? Very, very similar to the SSR cable, but it comes in black. And I like it. I think it's not quite as perfect as the SSR cable in terms of behavior. You can see it's maybe a little bit more springy, but it is a very, very excellent cable. Nice lightweight cable, and it looks pretty good too. I think where I would love for this cable to be improved is, again, go with like a small plastic connector like we have on these Moondrop cables, and that would make it better. But there's also the Truth Ear Ola cable, which I feel like I like even better than this one. So just get an Ola. 19 bucks. Temple saying, I just got my first Moondrops delivered. Went with the Kato for my first IM. Love it so far. Very good choice. Matthew Hilty saying, looking at the graphs, not replacing my kind of lava, but the price is very attractive. Yeah, again, Moondrop has had the sub $500 market kind of on lock for the past 3 years, and then they've stepped it up with the Blessing 3. So it seems like it's going to be another couple of years, unless we get surprised. I mean, honestly, like the sub $500 market has been getting better, right? These are two IMs that didn't exist for a couple of months ago. Very, very excellent in this price range. There's even stuff like the Awful Performer 5, 220 bucks, which is very, very good performing IM. The Mangard T2, a very good step up over the original Mangard T. So yeah, there's a lot of really good stuff starting to form in the sub $500 price point, but I still think that Moondrop's got the best stuff. Habblemet saying, I've been relatively curious about the SA6 Mark II instead of most of these, a bit more expensive. I'm just not interested in any of these somehow. Okay. Yeah, tough to say whether or not the SA6 Mark II will necessarily do what you want, but that review will be coming, so look forward to that one. Just got confirmation of that one overnight, kind of. Ricardo Ribeiro, or should I say Ricardo Ribeiro, saying, I bought the Blessing 2 with your review and I love it. Nice. Happy to make successful matches. I know my preferences aren't going to always align with everybody's, and that's why I try to describe things in terms as best I can to let you know where my biases lie, where I'm leaning towards something because it does exactly what I like, which may or may not be exactly what you like, and where it's not doing something that I like, or sorry, it's not doing something that you might like, or it is doing something that you might like. I try to do my best, but I can, of course, only speak from my perspective and my preferences. I can't say whether or not you're going to like something. So when it does work out, it makes me feel good. Sub-Zero Apocalypse, how you doing? Thanks for joining, and thanks for supporting the channel, as always. Audiotron saying, might be a record for live stream viewers today. I believe the Truth Ear Hexa review is probably my record. That was probably my PR for live stream viewers. I think if I want to beat the Truth Ear Hexa, I need to figure out a new marketing technique. Brandon saying, thanks for the review. Brandon, thank you for watching. I appreciate the feedback as well. S2 asking, is the Blessing 3 comparable to the S8 at all? And honestly, that is probably a head-to-head comparison I should spend more time doing. I haven't been listening to the S8 since I've had the Blessing 3 on hand, but a lot of the things that I would say about the Blessing 3 versus the Blessing 2 are kind of similar about S8 to Blessing 2, right? The S8 is a little bit lean in the upper bass versus the Blessing 2. The S8 has better treble extension versus the Blessing 2, and kind of solves that problem. But so it's like almost the exact kind of same trade-off. But here, obviously, with the Blessing 3, we're getting that for less than half the price of the Moondrop S8. And then on top, the Blessing 3 has got a dynamic driver for the bass, which kind of solves one of the problems that I have with the bass on the S8, although honestly, I think most of my issues with the bass on the S8 probably are more attributable to the leanness of the bass rather than the dynamic driverness of the bass, I'm guessing, or the balanced armatureness of the bass. So I don't know. I mean, I want to say from memory, I think that still the S8 is another step above in terms of imaging and head stage. Kind of in the same way that I described the Supernova as being another step up above these IMs. I do think that the S8 probably slots in there, but again, I haven't listened to it for the past couple of weeks, so that is probably a head-to-head that I should do in my free time. Ooh, Vitor Machado offering a custom EQ template for making the Blessing 3 into a dusk edition. So you're suggesting adding a low shelf of at 150 hertz with a gain of minus 2 dB. Oh, interesting. And then a high shelf. Hold on. Am I reading this reverse? I feel like I must be reading this reverse. Because you want a low shelf, I would assume increasing the bass. All right, let's get some clarification, Vitor. Or am I reading this incorrectly? Is it too early in the morning for me to read EQ values? Cristiano saying, I don't understand how with the big hit that was the Hexa, tuning the new lower mid frequency Moondrop does the opposite with the Blessing 3. I'm rather disappointed too. Well, I'm glad I'm not the only person that doesn't love the lower mid-range scoop, but I'm also at the same time not surprised that the Blessing 3, I guess I'm a little surprised, but I'm not shocked that the Blessing 3 went this route because, again, I think it is a trendy, popular tuning technique that allows you to get a little bit more bass emphasis without any risk of muddying up the lower mid-range, right? Which I think is kind of like, that's the technique. It's like just a little pinch pull. I just don't happen to like the trade-off personally. I'm glad you're with me. And then if I asking for comparisons with the SA6 Mark II, that'll be coming once that IM comes into the studio, which should be soon. Emmanuel asking, coming from the Blessing 2 Dusk and loving the Hexa, do I think the B3 is worth it? I mean, I described it as best I can. You're gonna have to make up your own mind if those differences are what you're looking for or not. I mean, here's what I will say. You've got a couple of IMs that are already very similar to this. I would be pretty tempted to try something different, but that's me. Because you've got two really good IMs right now. Bass range, saying it's my observation and would like to confirm if you've had them the same experience. I feel like the B3 bass is better than Dust despite the bass quantity being low. Yeah, and that's kind of what I was trying to get at when I was describing the bass on the Blessing 3 seeming to be a little bit tighter and springier. Like it feels like it delivers that sub bass tonality more accurately and more with better definition than the Blessing 2, and that's also the same with the Blessing 2 Dusk. I feel like the bass qualities on the Dusk and the original Blessing 2 are very, very similar, which I really didn't have any qualms with, but I do think that the Blessing 3 does it a little bit better. I don't think it's like a massive difference. Again, I didn't have issues with the bass on the other IMs, but it does seem noticeable in my listening experience. E-Boy saying, guess B3 won't replace Supernova as the only IM to keep category. Maybe Husk Edition? Great review. Yeah, I mean, maybe Husk Edition could. But again, it's hard for me to even imagine what to improve over the Supernova because I don't have complaints about it. Ghost Guy asking, are technicalities comparable to Variations or the S8? Again, I don't have the Variations on hand. I would like to do that head-to-head comparison. I want to say from memory, I think this is very comparable in terms of technical performance to the Variations. Because really the Variations, from memory, the only things that it really improved over the Blessing 2 for me and the Dusk was that upper treble performance, which was better. It was absolutely better. And again, I think that the Blessing 3 does that better as well than the Blessing 2. So I feel like this keeps up with the Variations improvement. And then when it comes to bass quality, I don't, it's been so long, I don't really have any strong descriptors of the bass on the Variations. So I don't remember if it had kind of like that same difference that I noticed between these two. Now versus the Moondrop S8, I still think that the Moondrop S8 will give you a stronger sense of that separation, that that width to the stereo image versus the Blessing 3, which does a good job. Make no bones about it, but I don't think it's going to keep up quite with the S8 there. But the bass texturing is actually probably better here on the Blessing 3 versus the S8 as well. Maybe a little bit less in sort of the BA timbre, the smoothness, maybe a little bit better in terms of vocal texturing versus the S8. So there's some trade-offs there. But I think most people would hear the S8 and still kind of instinctively say that's the better performing technical performance. Hal Brooks looking for exactly this comparison. Well, I'm glad I nailed it for at least somebody. I have the Dusk and have been contemplating the B3, the Orchestra Light, or the Studio 4 as my next unit. So I'm curious now, based on what you've heard in this comparison, what will be your choice? I Was a Prisoner in Your Skull. Nice review. Well, thank you. It's an interesting name. Vishwesh, love the review. Thank you. Will this be available in Japan? I'm pretty sure you can buy these in Japan. So I've linked to Shenzhen Audio in the description, as well as AliExpress. Pretty sure they ship worldwide, so I don't know. I've never tried ordering from them from Japan though. And Steven is asking about what about a comparison with the awful Performer 5. It's been months since I heard the Performer 5. I want to say Performer 5 is really good. Nice smooth set, kind of easy, inoffensive. I don't think that the Performer 5 has the same level of that mid-range vocal transparency that I really like on the Blessing 3 and the Blessing 2. So yeah, I don't know. The Performer 5 was like a really good, kind of hard to fault IEM, but also one that didn't hook me, I suppose. And pointing to exactly what that was without having heard it for the past few months, unfortunately, it's going to be difficult for me. James P is asking which sound is more soft and relaxing, the Blessing 3 or the Studio 4? I think they're very, very similar. If you're just looking for, like, you're kind of describing a tonal difference. They're very, very similar. So I don't know if I'm looking for one being softer and more relaxing. I wouldn't even make a distinction between these two. This one, of the ones on the table, this would be the softest, most relaxed sound, would be the Kiwi Ears Orchestra Light. Eliana Starda saying, I actually like the tuning of the Moondrop Sparks more than my Kato, so this looks like it might be a perfect upgrade for me. Yeah, from memory, it's been a long time since I heard the Sparks. The Sparks is a little bit leaner and brighter than the Kato being a little bit thicker and bassier. So yeah, if you like that balanced difference, I think that something like the Blessing 3 will be more your preference. Even the Blessing 2, to be honest. Oh my gosh, I am way behind on live chats, folks. I'm doing my best. William asking if I have the Blessing 2, should I upgrade to the Blessing 3? That's going to be a decision for you to make. I mean, I would be honest, like, again, if I had to choose one, if I had no other IEMs on the table, you have to choose Blessing 2 or Blessing 3, I'd probably walk away with the Blessing 3. That said, if I already had the Blessing 2, would I spend an extra $300 to get something that's better in some ways and not in others? I don't know that I would. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't know that I would. But that's going to be really up to you. Randall saying, I just learned that Soft Ears is a sister company of Moondrop. Yes, that's true. With that, the B3 and the S4 have the exact same tuning up to about 3K. Is the B4 worth the extra, or the Studio 4 worth the extra, in my opinion? So, I prefer the Blessing 3 to the Studio 4, okay? I think I like this one better than that. So is this one worth more than that one? Based purely on my preference for the sound, I'm gonna say no. But that doesn't mean that there's not some reason that someone might prefer the Studio 4, right? Why you might prefer the Studio 4. If you really do value that separation, that 3D width to the stereo image, I think that the Studio 4 does a little bit better job, a noticeably better job than the Blessing 3. Okay. Or if you're looking for an IM that looks like this, well, there's your choice. Or if you're looking for an IM that is a sealed design that gives you a little bit stronger isolation, well, there's your choice. If you're just purely on sound or purely on tonal balance, you're right. There's not much between them. I wouldn't pay $130 more just for the differences in the tonal balance because they're almost identical. But those differences that I just described there, is that worth $130 to you? That's the decision you have to make. I can't make. I mean, personally, I would walk away with the Blessing 3. But I like the aesthetics and the unventedness, the seal I don't necessarily need. And I like the sound better. So it's kind of an easy choice for me. Sam G asking about the timbre. I think that the timbre on the well, to be honest, I understand what you're talking about with the BAs on the Blessing 2 coming across a little bit plasticky. And for me, mostly that happens in the high frequency stuff, right? And this is definitely an improvement there, right? If I'm listening to cymbals, hi-hats, a lot of percussion stuff, sounds more realistic and less of that plasticky early decay that you can kind of get here on this. As for the rest of the sound, in terms of timbre, it's really hard to pick much difference between them. I think they're both an improvement over something like this, which comes across more overall, less so isolated to the treble, just kind of more overall in the sound, a little bit more smoothed over, versus both of these do a better job at texturing kind of throughout the mid-range. IMO. Andrew Huntley saying, I've been looking to upgrade to the new SA6. The Variations or the Meteor is pretty much my daily driver, but I'm not sure if they're worth the price increase over the Blessing 3. I mean, I'll say Variations for me, I like the Blessing 3 better than the Variations from memory. I haven't heard them back to back, but from memory, I prefer the Blessing 3. The Meteor is a different thing entirely, okay? So you got to decide first of all, which of those things is the thing you want. Do you want the lean, neutral, analytical Blessing 3, or do you want the bassy, bombastic, warm, full Meteor? Because they're just entirely different things. And then the SA6, the new SA6, I haven't heard it yet. So maybe we'll get that comparison. In fact, I'm pretty sure with the SA6 Mark II review, I'll have to bring in the Blessing 3 as kind of like a baseline. So that'll be in there. Look for that. And Ankuro saying, get the Zen's Top instead. Yeah, I've heard some good things about the Zen's Top. I'm kind of curious to check that one out, but I haven't heard it myself. Kresh saying, looks are subjective. S2 saying the Studio 4 look is the best, but Kresh also agrees the Studio 4 look is the best. Andrew saying, I have to admit, I kind of hate the looks of the Blessing 3, which, man, again, that is surprising for me to hear, but interesting. Okay, bass range, the Studio 4 looks good. Zest Defenders voting for the Orc Light. Descart voting for the Orchestra. Kelvin, you like the Studio 4s or the Orchestra Light? A little biased because you got the Orchestra, but I guess that's probably why you bought it. Where are we at? Enviously Envy saying love the looks of the Blessing 3. Dimit saying the Blessing 3 is the prettiest. We got another vote from Kai for the Studio 4. Suicidal, wow, interesting name. Saying Blessing 2. Oh, interesting. All right. Zest Defender liked the Blessing 3 a lot. All right, so I'm not alone in liking the Blessing 3. I'm just surprised at how many people maybe don't like it. And again, I share the preference for a matte design, but it would not be enough to make me not like this aesthetic. Again, the subtle shaping of the outer panel, I think, does a lot to make this just more appealing than this slab. Right? Oh, Milo, dig it. On Havelmet saying my favorite looking IM period is probably the SA6. I think that's a good vote. The SA6 is a very handsome IM. I would just say, what is my favorite looking IM of all time? I feel like I've probably the S8. Sorry. Yeah, the S8 is just gorgeous, and it's not far off the Blessing 3. So maybe that's why I like it so much. Oh, Vitor, you're saying you don't like the blue strip on the Blessing 3. It just looks too artificial. It's trying to emulate that blue look of the B2 dynamic driver. So, I mean, what's going on here? And I guess I didn't cover it. You can kind of see the two dynamic drivers are sandwiched there together, and this blue thing is in between them. Interestingly enough, the dynamic drivers are facing each other, okay? The back of this is the back of the dynamic, and that's the back of the dynamic driver. And so this blue plastic thing that's in here, that's integrated into the shape of the shell, is actually the component that takes the audio from both of these dynamic drivers that are both, again, firing toward each other, and pipes it into the nozzle, which you can kind of see coming out here. So it's actually appears to be a functional part of how the IM is built. Now, they could have not colored it blue if they didn't want to. But I think it's, I like it. I think it's a nice little touch. It's subtle. Well, maybe it's not so subtle. A little more subtle here on the Blessing 3, where the blue that comes through almost just looks like it's the wiring. I don't even know. It's definitely more on the nose here, but I like it. I dig it. Cristiano saying, yes, a matte finish on the Blessing 3 would be awesome, just like they did with the Kato. Yeah, the matte Kato is pretty handsome. Ricardo saying, I'm the only one that prefers the Blessing 2 to the Dusk. I don't think I am the only one, actually. I think you're wrong on that one. But I appreciate if you disagree. Base Range saying U4S is currently my favorite IM for looks. Oh, that is actually a very handsome IM, as is the Neo. Love the metal and the slate blue finish with the meteor graphic and resin, I guess. Yeah, it's a very good look. A Chandra saying its cable sucks. Interesting. I don't know that I agree that the cable sucks. But yeah, you can swap it out if you'd like. What's which cable do you swap it to? What's your preference? Brandon Mariquin asking, which do I think is the one with the best passive noise isolation between the Orchestra and the Studio 4? I'll be honest, I have not tested that extensively. Mostly when I do like sound isolation testing, it's just me sitting on the couch while my wife watches K-dramas. So not the most extensive isolation test. But if I were to go out on a limb and say, I think the Orchestra Lite isolates a little bit better. Largely because this thing just fits into my ear a little bit more securely. Like all of this locks into my concha a little bit better than this one, which may be subtly different. But this one seems to leave a little bit more of a gap around here with my ear, whereas again, this one kind of just like sucks in there. Gambit saying Moondrop missed a great opportunity to make the Blessing 3 really special with powerful quality bass. They chose to go the safe route and only improve in the Blessing 2. Yeah, I guess that's a way of characterizing it. I mean, they have a sound that they're trying to go for, and they took the Blessing 2 and they tried to make it more like what they wanted to go for. If you're familiar with Moondrop's VDSF target, right? It shouldn't be a surprise that that's the direction that they went with this. Could they have done something entirely different? Sure, they could have done any number of things. But I'm not surprised that they did the thing that they've been saying that they're trying to do for the last 8 years they've been making IMs. Vitor is saying, my theory is that they wanted to increase the driver count, and the easiest thing to do was to shove another DD. I mean, look, I don't want to discount the double dynamic driver as just like a marketing gimmick. Again, I assume when they're designing and building the sound, it had something to play into it. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say that it does X or Y because I don't know. And I think Moondrop, maybe the way they described it was that they say using the double dynamics allowed them to get lower bass distortion or something like that. Again, unless I'm hearing them side by side, I don't know how I would personally know that on this side of the table. But I'm also not going to make the claim that they're lying or that they're just gimmicks because I don't know. Again, if you are seeing double dynamic drivers and you assume a lot of bass, it's not that. You can see that in the frequency response. There's nothing hidden in the frequency response there. I don't know. I was kind of curious, what do people assume double dynamic drivers means? Because it feels like if you're expecting it to have a certain result and it doesn't do that, ergo it's a gimmick, I want to know what is that result that you expect, because I don't know. I don't have expectations. The same that like when people say like this is beryllium coated versus titanium coated, I do not have expectations of what that means, and so I generally just don't care. If it says it has 10 balanced armatures versus 8 balanced armatures, I don't care. I mean, it's worth kind of describing. It's like an interesting quirk of it, right? It's kind of neat that the Kiwi Ears Orchestra's got 8 balanced armatures crammed in here, and you get to see them and look at them. What does that mean for the sound in particular? I don't really care. It's the end result that matters, and I've heard a lot of IMs that have 8 balanced armatures that don't sound the same as this IM that does have 8 balanced armatures. In fact, including the original orchestra, which has 8 balanced armatures as well and sounds pretty distinctly different from this. So that's where like I think it's dangerous and well, dangerous is somewhat overstating it, but like just try to hear these things. Like it's got double dynamic drivers. This is what we were trying to do with like just try to hear that as like the story, and like the story is interesting, right? No doubt about it. I am interested in this stuff. But try not to like get strong conclusions from it has X coding, double dynamic drivers, it has this technology. Because I just don't find that it predictably correlates with any specific outcome that I perceive. In almost no case. So be careful with the marketing stuff. Again, not that it's a gimmick. The double dynamic drivers might very well be responsible for absolutely everything that I like about the bass in here. I just don't know. Matthew Hilty asked me, what is an excellent DAC dongle with 4.4 millimeters? Dude, it's like so far from what I care about. I'll be honest with you. I'm happy with an Apple dongle. I'm not a big fan of balance cables. I see someone else asking me about differences between the Blessing 3 and the S8. Again, unfortunately, I didn't do that head-to-head comparison, so I can kind of only describe it based on audio memory, which as we know is pretty fallible, but having spent a lot of time with the S8, fairly strongly confident that the tonal balance is very, very similar. You're right, absolutely. So pretty much everything I described about the tonals of the Blessing 3 you could apply to the S8. In terms of the technical performance, I think the Blessing 3's bass is better, and the S8 is just a little bit more technical in terms of that head stage and 3D separation. Ooh, Rob, you pulled the trigger on the Supernova this morning. It'll take 6 weeks to make. Wow. Okay, 6 weeks. That sounds about right. I think for me it was about 4 weeks, but I guess they're getting more orders, so we're gonna get a Hawk Nova coming in. That's exciting. Every time a Supernova gets made, an angel gets its wings, or something like that. Mark saying, just a tip for anyone who has loose ear tips on their Blessing 3, it's because they stretch. Wait, they don't become loose because they stretch. They absolutely become loose because they stretch, I promise you. But again, you're not wrong that like cleaning it with alcohol may help as well. But I clean my IMs with alcohol, and yet the tips stopped holding onto them. Ooh, Kelvin suggesting adding a thicker metal faceplate that people could do their own engraving on. I mean, I'm not so bold as to be able to. I wouldn't take an engraver to this, but it's also not a skill I have. That could be cool. That could be cool. Like, again, also not bold enough to do this, but maybe you could even sand it and get that matte look that you like. I'm not going to do that. Maybe someone will. Action Jackson, you've got Earl Grey with honey hitting the spot right now. That sounds pretty good. I actually made the claim recently that I think honey is very underrated. Honey is awesome. It's like, even just like a spoonful of honey is pretty good. And then, you know, there's obviously all the applications of honey, like in your tea. Very good choice. See Action Jackson asking about the best Android equalizer apps. I'm not a big equalizer fan, or I shouldn't say fan, just not a big user of it. When I do EQ on Android, I do it through Qtelix, which is a good app for doing that, but that also requires the Qtelix hardware. I believe PowerAmp has EQ functionality, or has parametric EQ into it. I haven't played around with it a ton. The UI doesn't seem the best, but it's there. There's also an app, Wavelet, that people use. I don't think it does parametric EQ though. I think it just has like a 10-band equalizer, or just at least a graphic equalizer. I don't know how many bands. And that's about the extent of my experience with using EQ on Android. Yeah, I guess if I were to do it, I would probably use PowerAmp because I already use that app anyway. But it's not going to be like a system-wide EQ, I assume. Duke saying the bass is the only thing stopping me from doing this as an upgrade to the Kato. Yeah, and again, I caution people against the word upgrade usually, because this is not a better Kato. It is a different thing than a Kato. And same even with like the Blessing 2. The Blessing 2 is not a better Kato. It is a different thing. I like the Blessing 2 better. I like the Blessing 3 better than the Kato. But depending on what you like about your Kato, you might not view it as an upgrade because they just do different things. The Kato being a warmer, bassier sound versus these being a leaner, more neutral mid-range sound. Zerpocalypse saying, as someone who plays games with IMs, imaging is important. In a lot of games, accurate representation of positioning can give you an edge in certain scenarios. Yeah, I understand that. I guess I'm just wondering, like, is there a difference between an IM that does imaging well for music and an IM that does imaging well for gaming? And yeah, Zerpocalypse, I agree. The variations is Helios levels of lean, maybe even leaner, man. I don't know what my memory of the variations is like. I was expecting to get like blammed out of existence with the bass curve on it, but there was just like half the time like no bass content. A really inconsistent set for me. Gambit, no, I have not heard of the Sound Rhyme SR8. Be careful of Head-Fi hype trains. I'm trying to think, when has been an IM that I've heard first hyped on Head-Fi that I heard and I was actually like equally impressed by. I might need some help on that. Like, what are some hype trains that maybe I'm likely to be behind that started on Head-Fi? Because I don't know. I feel like all the things that usually come out of Head-Fi, I've not been as impressed with. Jacob Fink asking, I assume you're talking about the Blessing 3, how does it compare to the Sennheiser IE600? It's a very different IM. And the 200. Those are kind of like V-shaped sound signatures where they've got more rumbly sub bass, much more sparkly upper treble, and the mid-range is not the star of the show. Whereas the Blessing 3, the mid-range is the star of the show. So less contrasty in general. The IE600 has... Look, I love the IE600, but yeah, it's just a very different thing. The IE600 has really sharp, incisive treble, really good definition on stuff. I think the bass content is more satisfying than the bass on the Blessing 3, but that's why I would go for the IE600 versus the Blessing 3, and why I would go for the Blessing 3 is that the vocal content is just next level on the Blessing 3 versus the IE600, where it's pretty decent, but not going to blow anyone away. So I guess it depends on the music you listen to, or even just your mood. For me, it definitely comes down to mood, because I like to listen to the same stuff, the same music on all my IMs, just different things. Rake Jake, thank you for the super chat. Appreciate it, Rake. How you doing? Saying people hate the BA timbre of the Blessing 3s and the Blessing 2 compared to the EST of the Variations. Do you find the timbre to be vastly different between the Blessing and the Variations? Again, I don't have the Variations on hand, so I can only go from memory. But I don't find there to be a significant difference between balanced armatures and ESTs. I mean, there's like maybe a slight difference in some, like on the EJ07M. I would describe the treble on that as kind of a little bit gritty sounding, almost like a little sandy in its texturing, which seems unique to probably something to do with the ESTs and that, but then that's not even really a thing that I necessarily hear in other EST implementations. I've heard EST sometimes described as wispy, which I can get sometimes. I don't think that that's true of the Blessing 3. Well, it doesn't have ESTs, but I also don't remember the Variation sounding especially wispy, so I don't know that I would describe it of different there. I don't know. Again, from memory, I want to say that the treble on the Variations is very similar to the treble on the Blessing 3. From memory, there is no difference I would describe, but it's been probably about 6 months since I've heard a Variation, so take that with a grain of salt. But thanks for the question. Oh my gosh, I am struggling through these chats, but thank you for keeping them all coming. Might have to scan through these a little bit faster than usual. What's up, Scott? Just now saw Scott pop into play. Oh, replacing tile in the bathroom. That sounds fun. Be careful. For some reason, I guess I must have been scarred by it as a child, but I still have memories of when we did the tile in our bathroom at. It's funny, ironic. I was just talking about as a family memory, and right then I got a text message from my family. Sorry, where was I going? I have memory as a kid of us redoing the tile in our bathroom, and like as I recall, like you have the tile sheets, and they have like some tool that kind of like cuts along the length of the tile, and you like kind of like break it, and like that's how you get the tile pieces into the shape that you want. And an artifact of that is like these little small tile slivers that can kind of get scattered. And I have a memory still of, after the fact, I guess we didn't do the best job of cleaning it up. I stepped on one and I had a tile sliver. Like kind of imagine, not quite definitely not like quite the size of like a dime, but like something like that shape. Sliver, like very thin but round, had dug itself into the bottom of my foot, and I remember pulling that out, and just for some reason that memory probably like 10 or 12 at the time. Still have that. I'm still hanging on to that one. So be careful. Be careful with that tile. And Autopom, your feedback on what you would improve with the Supernova, you're saying maybe a bit more treble extension. I don't know if the tech can improve, but honestly, these are not needed. But they are improvements. Okay, there you go. Dan Zelino asking, never had an IM in this price range. I own an Aria and I really love them. Is there a significant sound quality difference between the Aria and the Blessing 3? In my opinion, yes. Yeah, there's a pretty big jump in terms of what I value in the sound, right? What I really value in sound, that's a number of things, but I guess maybe like the biggest thing would be that delineation between instruments and sound, right? Sort of the clear separation between each instrument and sort of its position in the three-dimensional sound field that gets generated by my brain. And I think all of these IMs that I've had on the table, I think are next level versus something like the Aria, for me personally. But some of that can honestly come down to even just personal anatomy. I don't know, not everyone hears these IMs the same way that I do, because they are making certain assumptions about the anatomy of your ear canal, the outer part of your ear, and how it might interpret outside sounds from the real world, trying to recreate those into the ear canal. But for me, these all do a really good job. Seen a lot of the same questions, so hopefully I answered them earlier about comparisons with the S8 and the Kato. Calvin saying, I prefer a later and more gradual bass tuck like MRS mentioned for the Orchestra Light. Yeah, the Orchestra Light, I think, is... I don't know. I wonder how much of it has to do with the treble, which is pretty relaxed on it, but it really does not come across lean in the way that I expect its bass curve to do it. And maybe it's just like, because it's happening like 40, 50 hertz later or earlier, however you want to describe that, versus the bass tuck that you get on these other IMs. Maybe that's all the difference in the world. Maybe it's also the treble, maybe it's some combination of the both. But yeah, I do think that the Orchestra Light does not have the leanness issues that some of these other ones do. Red Gothnick. No, I have not talked about how it compares to the Dunu Vulcan. I was not super impressed with the Dunu Vulcan, to be honest. It's been a long time since I listened to it. But I did not find the technical performance to be very standout. I think the Vulcan had a really good bass, from what I remember. But not very strong in terms of that, again, that 3D separation of sound, which is one of the things I like. Maybe Vulcan versus Orchestra Light would be an interesting comparison. But I tend to gravitate much more toward the Orchestra Light. And exactly why I couldn't say, because I haven't listened to them in a while. And Michael Corcoran asking, does it attract fingerprints? It attracts fingerprints, yes. Apologies for the downtime. I'm just scanning through comments and trying to look for questions that are maybe a little bit more unique. See the same gaming question coming up. What's up, Shad? Sorry you missed the stream, but thanks for joining anyway. VSG, hey, how you doing, man? Good seeing you there. Live and in person. I guess it is, yeah, I guess usually when I stream, it's pretty late there. I think you're in the UK, right? And I'm starting earlier, so I guess it makes sense. Stands to reason that we could finally meet up. Same for Mr. YouTube Premium, which is a bold name. Kelvin pointing out that the two dynamic drivers are facing each other so that they can kiss more easily, obviously. Yep, I agree. And Vitor, you're saying that PowerAmp has a standalone EQ app. Okay, interesting. See, I've only ever used the EQ that's built into the music app because I like PowerAmp as a music player. And I've noticed that it was there and I poked around with it, but I haven't really used it extensively. I didn't know that they have a standalone EQ app, which is interesting. Brando asking an important question. How large is the blessing compared to an IRL object? Well, I'm glad you asked that question because I have no idea what IRL object you want me to compare it to. But let's let's compare a Blessing 3 IRL to a AirPods case. There you go. That's how big it is. Thickness wise, you can see. Not as thick as an AirPods case, but not that much thinner, to give you an idea. And I would pull out the AirPods and show you the AirPods themselves, but then I'm worried it's going to connect to my computer and screw up my audio, so I'm going to avoid that. How about a Blessing 3 versus a tube of Carmex? Well, there you go. It is not as long as a tube of Carmex. Thickness-wise, not as thick as the cap of a tube of Carmex, but definitely thicker than the back of a tube of Carmex. And then width-wise, also not as wide as a tube of Carmex. Any other IRL items? Pull in Magic Square Bumblebee versus a Moondrop Blessing 3. This is a very small transformer. And you can see the Blessing 3 is even smaller than my small transformer. I hope that helps and wasn't entirely pointlessly sarcastic. But those are the things I have around. Like, I guess maybe if I had like a quarter, a coin would probably be the best sort of scale, but I don't have one within reach, unfortunately. Maybe a banana, but that would be even harder to compare. You're asking how to sound on IMs compare with headphones. I want to try IMs. How does a $400 IM compare to headphones in the same price range? I mean, the short version is that they're just different. Like if you're looking for, again, this linear scale of good, better, best, I don't think IMs and headphones can be compared that way. They just do sounds differently. And broadly, some sort of generalizations that I can make about the difference would be IMs do bass better than headphones. IMO. I think IMs do, especially sub-bass frequencies. Headphones maybe do a little bit better job of more consistently giving you that physicality behind bass if you're listening to like a bassy headphone. But bass on headphones can either come across, in my experience, on open back headphones, not a lot of bass. On closed back headphones, usually boomy and muddy. Whereas on IMs, you can get a lot of bass if you want. This is not a good example. You can get a lot of bass on an IM without it being muddy in a way that I don't hear on headphones. So there's that. What else? I mean, I think in terms of just kind of like an ease and a naturalness and like a depth and these are very vague terms, but like I think like my Sennheiser HD600s do a certain thing with sound very different than IMs do. At least IMs of like the tonal balance that I tend to prefer. The Sennheiser HD600 is like tonally my jam. It's neutral, mid-range, forward, but also kind of has like this warmth and like ease to it, whereas a neutral tuned IM, which I feel like is kind of going for a similar tonal balance, and to my ear does sound tonally similar, won't have kind of that same lushness, I suppose, that the HD600 has. So I don't know. I don't know if that's distinctly a headphone versus IM thing, or just a difference between implementations. Try not to get too bogged down in those kinds of generalizations, because I guess I just don't find them that helpful. I think the biggest generalization that I would say between headphones and IMs is going to be in the bass. If you want a lot of bass, I think IMs do it better without the compromises, versus headphones with a lot of bass tend to, I don't think, sound very good. It would be my broad characterization. Malik asking, you mentioned that the sound on these are too lean and lacking fullness due to the bass curve. Are there any particular genres this affects the most? Which genres do these excel at? So again, I try not to make genre, well, I just don't make genre-based generalizations, because I don't usually find everything in a particular genre is produced the same way. And how a particular song is produced is going to matter a whole lot more than the particular genre. Okay, I made this point before. An artist I like, Erasure. Okay, even within that one artist, within one genre, from album to album to album, there's one album that's like really bright and lean. There's another album that's like really dark and kind of muddy, and then there's some other albums that are just kind of like in between. And different headphones and IMs, if I was like trying to optimize for any one of those particular albums, I would probably pick a different headphone or IM. But I don't do that usually, right? Because it's not very useful for me to pull out a different IM just to listen to one album and then swap out to another IM. So, and I think this is absolutely true, if not even more so true than for genres, right? So you're saying like, I'm into jazz. What's a good headphone for jazz? It's like, bro, I don't like which artist, which album, which song on that album. Maybe I can find something, and I'm not going to because it's tedious, but maybe I could find something for you optimized for that use case. But finding something for you that's optimized for your genre, I don't know, no. So the generalizations that I will make about the Blessing 3 though, the leanness tends to affect music that doesn't have a lot of sub-bass content, okay? And now broadly, this is not always true, but broadly, classic rock might not have a lot of sub-bass content. Electronic music tends to have more sub-bass content, and I would say more modern productions seem to have more sub-bass content than more productions from, like, let's say the 80s and older. So there's a generalization that hopefully is helpful, but it's really just a generalization. Hopefully you know your music well enough to know, is my music content that is light on sub-bass and reliant on the mid-bass to give it that sense of depth and punch? Because if it is, it might not come across very strong in this. See, we got some gaming talk. Unfortunately, I don't have a ton to contribute to the gaming conversation, except I'm playing Golden Sun on my Game Boy Advance, and looking forward to playing Street Fighter 6 with friends. Even though I don't know, I'm not digging the aesthetic on Street Fighter 6, if I'm honest. And Vitor has given his take on the difference between IMs and headphones. To me, it's more about the listening experience. Headphones are generally more comfortable, especially open backs, just feel like less claustrophobic. But for quality, usually IMs are better in the price range. There you go. I think that is not a bad take. Matthew asking, do you think it's a possibility that people generally like super bassy IMs in general because they are not getting tips that seal well? No, I think there's just people that like more bass. As simple as that. And I think depending on what you listen to, look, I've stopped listening to a lot of music because it doesn't sound good. It's like it's not produced well. But not everyone's willing to do that, right? So if you're not, and I'm not even saying like that's a good idea. Like that's just kind of how I've gravitated, how my preferences have changed. There's music that I used to love that I don't listen to anymore because it's not produced the way I want it. And maybe if you're not, willing to, or you just don't want to change the music you listen to, and you want to get an IM that's going to make up for the deficiencies in the production quality. Maybe there's a reason to prefer one tuning versus another that might be different than my preferences. But like honestly, I don't think you can underrate. I don't think you can overrate. Sorry, the difference that just personal preference comes into play. And like, if someone says they like more bass, I'm not going to try and like find some external justification like, oh, your music sucks, or oh, you're not getting a good seal, or oh, your ears are broken, or whatever. Like, people have accused me of having broken ears because my tastes are different. It's like, you're thinking about it wrong. It's people just like different things, man, and it's okay. That said, I will say that if you're not used to using IMs, it's very likely that you will struggle with seal. I know my first experiences with listening to IMs is I didn't know how to put this thing in my ear, and then once I got it in my ear, there was like, is it comfortable? Is it not? And then like kind of like third order effect is there a seal? And like, do I even know what a seal is? I mean, obviously now I do. I'm very comfortable with it, but for someone that's not used to wearing IMs, it might not be obvious to them that they do or don't have a seal. But I think that's something that if you're into the hobby, if you buy a set and spend a week with it, you're gonna know. I find it hard to believe that anyone would like be living with IMs day to day and not realize that they don't have a seal. Enviously Envy saying, I wish the triple and Karen cable came with white SSR connectors, but the glossy connectors might match well with the faceplate. Yeah, I agree. Karopi asking about Blessing 3 versus variations. We talked about that earlier, so unfortunately I'm going to have to ask you to rewind. Ahmed asking about these glasses. These are, I believe, Warby Parker. Oh my gosh. I forget the model name. I don't know. These are actually fairly new for me. I've all my life never worn glasses, but my close focusing distance has like been progressively getting a little bit worse. So like even just here, this distance between me and the camera lens, I have to strain to like focus on that stuff. And so I'm reading a screen that's right here. Rather than strain, I'll just pull in a pair of reading glasses. Malik saying, Golden Sun sends me back from time to time. I'll play things on stock hardware. There's nothing like playing a handheld retro game on the stock speakers that humbles an audiophile. You know what I was actually surprised is that my Game Boy Advance can actually power my Sennheiser HD600s, kind of no problem. It doesn't sound very good. Like, it's an interesting point of reference in terms of like what bad amplification sounds like, and I assume what I'm hearing is bad amplification because it's fairly obviously subpar. But in terms of like volume levels, I'm actually pretty surprised that it gets loud enough. And you referenced stock hardware. I assume that means in contrast to playing on emulators. Yeah, I'm not actually a big fan of playing on emulators. Never really have been. It's kind of the same reason I don't really like gaming on PC. I don't like the fiddliness of it. I don't want to have to configure the graphics rendering for whatever particular hardware I'm playing on. I just want to plug it in and have it work. And there's something nostalgic about taking that cartridge and Kelvin saying, I'm into the hobby for music. The IMs are just another type of fun. Won't be limiting my playlist for the hardware. Music first, like the artist intended. LOL. Yeah, unfortunately, man, there's just like some music I love, Iron Maiden, Blind Guardian, that I don't listen to anymore. I mean, I'll listen to it in my car because driving with the top down, speakers blasting, like anything sounds good. It's just fun. But those recordings are like so two-dimensional that they're just boring for me, no matter what I'm listening to in terms of like personal audio stuff. I don't know, maybe if that was all I listened to, I would have different preferences. That's actually very possible in terms of which IAMs are my favorite. But I have steered away from music with that production quality. Ray Jake asking, do I ever feel concerned that people new to my channel will be put off by the length of my videos because they don't know that I do Q&A sessions? Yes, I absolutely know that people are turned off by the length of my videos. And that's the big part, actually, why I started cutting out the Q&As after the fact, and then I make them available as a separate video. That's just because people kept showing up in the comments and saying, your video is too long. And funny enough, my videos are exactly the same length as they used to be, but I don't get those comments anymore because I chop off the Q&A. At least the length of the content is exactly the same as it used to be, but the comments have changed, and that's why. But even then, like, my reviews are not like, even once I cut out the Q&A, my reviews tend to be 25, sometimes 30 minutes long, which is still pretty long, to be honest. If I was doing like edited videos rather than live streams, I could probably cut it down. You know, I think my ideal content would probably be between 8 to 10 minutes. But I hate editing so much that I just do them as live streams and I deal with it. And it probably does limit to some extent the growth of my channel, but I don't know. For me, the longevity of me wanting to continue doing this is more important, since this isn't my job. I don't have to do this. I just have to want to do it. Otherwise, it won't happen. Kasumi is saying I use emulators on PS Vita. It's probably a good console for emulating on. Vlad asking, do you think there is correlation between treble extension and technical performance? Yes. In fact, I have somewhat jokingly, but like half seriously, at one point put together like a frequency response graph and like highlighted sub bass and, well, let's see, for you it would be like sub bass and high frequency, like treble extension, and then separately highlighted everything in between. And I labeled the everything in between as tonality and the everything in treble extension and sub bass as technicalities. And now that's like a very, very vague, broad, loose heuristic, but it's not too far from the truth. I think there is absolutely something there. Descartes saying, I am 6 diopter nearsighted. Anything in 1 meter range is blurry. See, I'm the opposite. I'm farsighted. Anything like, this is not very close, right? That is not very close to me. But without the glasses, I have to strain a little bit to see it clearly. Vitor saying, using CRT shaders on RetroArch has changed my experience with emulators. You can get a pretty good representation of CRT image. Yeah, I can see wanting to do that. Because yeah, there is something to, I mean, part of like the emulating a CRT is like partly nostalgia, but I think there's also something more to it in that the art was designed to be displayed for like these older games with sprites and stuff. The art was designed to be displayed on screens that had scan lines, okay? And so there is, you know, sometimes when you are looking at it on a modern LCD screen that doesn't have the scan lines, you lose some of that soft quality, maybe even like something that would look rounded and kind of realistic on a CRT. On a modern display, it's just going to look very blocky and obviously pixely. Now, to some extent, I'm actually kind of two minds. Like, to some extent, like, it looks nice. Like, I like the sharpness of it, but There's no doubt that like certain things just work better on a display with scan lines. Kelvin, you're saying the same issue for you with, I assume you're saying Red Hot Chili Peppers mastering. It comes across as flat when consumed through good headphones and IMs. Big bummer for me. Yeah, I can imagine that. Malik saying listening to Blind Guardian while speed running down Highway 1 is a hell of a feeling, just saying. Hell yeah. Oh, down a highway. You didn't say Highway 1. I put that in there. I'm a Highway 1 stan. Kasumi asking, would I describe the Tongzu Wu heyday as Harman neutralish? No. I would describe it as more of a V-shaped sound. Like kind of a mild V-shape. But no, I would not. Like the attributes that I define as Harman for me are that lower mid-range bass scoop, elevated sub bass, and too much lower treble. And I don't think, apart from the sub bass emphasis, and I don't think any of those really apply to the Tongzu Wu or the Heyday version. Yeah. Kelvin saying I widened my music diet a lot after getting into IM, so that was a good unintended side benefit. Yeah, same here, absolutely. And partly it was, my desire to find the stuff that was produced well. And part of it's just that, I don't know, spending more time listening to music, you get bored of stuff, and I need to find something new, so I always got to be branching out. All right, folks, I think on that note, it is my lunchtime. I got to eat lunch, and then I got to suit up, and it still looks a little gloomy outside, but should be good enough for a motorcycle ride. So that's how I'm going to spend the rest of my Sunday. Hope you all have a good Sunday as well. Thank you again for tuning in for the live stream. If you haven't on the way out, please do hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ding the bell, and share this video with someone who you think might enjoy it. And I'll catch you on the next super review. Cheers.